Hi, I'm Brandon, and I want to welcome you back to the Tansson Talks show. This is the end of our autumn 2024 season, and I'm so glad that you're here. I'm very excited today to be speaking with my guest here today, my friend Oakley Weddle.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, Oakley?
Good. Thanks so much for having me back on. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you back on. This is episode 96 of the show. Can you believe that?
Ooh, I cannot. You're almost there. Almost 100.
Yeah, I know it feels so unbelievable, but it becomes more and more real by the day. And I hope that you've been doing well over this past year.
I've been great, and I know we'll get into it, but it's been a journey, but a very, very good journey, especially now, looking back on it.
Well, I'm so excited, like I said, for us to speak about this journey. In fact, even recording wise, we have officially met with our first podcast a year and 5 days ago.
That's wild. Yeah, I was listening to it last week, and I'm just like praying that I don't repeat myself, but I think that I won't in some ways because there's a lot there that is not negated by what and where I am now. It's just that we evolve and we change, and that's great. And I'm just radically accepting that.
Yeah, well, I think that's a part of that journey of next year speaking about in our previous conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have you ever seen the Vogue Billie Eilish interview that they do every year, and they ask her like the same questions every year?
No, I have not seen that.
Oh, it's great. So they've done it for like 7 years, and so like I'm having my Billie Eilish moment right now. Thank you so much, Brandon, for giving this to me.
Well, the pleasure, as it is all mine. And Oakley, if we can go ahead and actually start by you reintroducing yourself for the watching and listening audience here today.
Absolutely. My name is Oakley Weddle. Good morning, or whatever time you're listening to this. Good something. I hope that you all are doing well. Thank you so much for watching. I am. Oh, I almost said I'm a graduate student. Wow, that was just like muscle memory. Anyway, I'm no longer I'm kind of a graduate student. I'm in a graduate certificate program. I'm finished that up in the fall, so I kind of am a graduate student. And I work at ProTech Services Group. I am the marketing director, so I work professionally as a marketer and public relations professional. I operate and run two nonprofits. The first one being my late brother's nonprofit, the PEYitforward Foundation. I am this year's board president, so I'm happy to move forward with that mission and see what else we can do. And then this past May, actually founded a nonprofit called Firefly Creative. Thank you. It is a nonprofit dedicated to providing theatrical entertainment to the Memphis and Mid-South community in accessible, unconventional ways. And happy to talk about that a little bit more later. And I am an adjunct professor at the University of Memphis. I teach graphic design, and I absolutely adore that. I love teaching. Trying to think what else I do. I think that's it right now. But, I'm always open to more opportunities. Some hobbies. I love traveling. I've traveled a lot this year. And I love singing, music, obviously theater. I love binge watching shows. One of my favorite shows is The Office and Parks and Rec. I always go back to those, and I think my humor is the foundation of those shows. And I also love escape rooms. I'm really into that, and doing any sort of, mystery solving with friends. And I love spending time with my family and my dogs that you'll likely hear in the background. So yeah, it's a good life.
Well, I'm so glad, like I said, that you've been having, this good luck, for this past year. And I'm very excited, like I said, to dive in. And even from your introduction, there's so many things I think that I could, speak up. But I did want to actually start off with asking about your new nonprofit. So I did want to hear all about Firefly Creative.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. So Firefly, well, I'll talk about how it kind of came about and why we do it and what we're looking to doing. So my mom runs a cottage tutorial, which is basically a semi-school for people who homeschool, and they come to her house and They do 2 days a week. They do school. I was homeschooled my entire life, and she is a phenomenal teacher. She has her teaching degree in special needs and education, and she's always been passionate about doing that. And when my brother died in 2016, she had been teaching at one and decided that as a renewed sense of purpose and to give her happiness, she wanted to start her own. And so she did. And in 2017, she came to me and was like, would you want to start teaching them theater, doing musicals, or doing musical numbers? And so we started doing some small songs, and it started with Rainbow Connection. And I just fell in love with teaching them how to do it. And I had taught in high school doing, teaching theater for kids who often did theater a lot. But this was very unique because none of them had done theater. They didn't know what it was. So I was starting from ground zero with them, which was a really unique experience. And then the next year we did another song. I think we did I'd Like to Teach the World to Sing, like from the Coke commercial. And they loved that. And then the next year they were like, you have these skills and we're really interested. Would you want to put on a musical for your senior year? This was my senior year of high school. And I was like, oh, that could be a cool senior year project. And so I started it. We had auditions in December of 2019 for Seussical, which is the Dr. Seuss musical. And then March 2020 came, and we all know what happens then. And we were supposed to perform in May indoors at my church, and that didn't end up happening because of COVID. So we were all kind of left very sad. We had worked very hard. And my mom, being the tenacious woman that she is and was then as well, said, what if we do it outside? And I said, that's crazy, but it might just work. And we did. We contacted all the parents and we just said, if you would be comfortable, we're going to have a summer camp to rehearse, and we're going to have performances, and everything's going to be outside. And we're going to social distance, and we're going to do all the things. And they were all for it, and we did it, and it was absolutely magical. And so that was my senior project. And I was like, okay, I'm moving away, and y'all, good luck, Godspeed. And they were like, wait, no. Would you want to do another? We should do this every year. They were really interested. They had gotten bitten by the theater bug, as we call it. And that's kind of one of the reasons I named it Firefly, because it's a bug. And it, anyway. So again, we did Madagascar the next year, and then we did Shrek. And Shrek was really pivotal for us. It was a big production, and it really challenged the kids. And it kind of set us up for the future, because if we had not done that, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing today. And then we did Aladdin, and then we did this last year Lion King, and Lion King was the most successful thus far. We had about 850 attendees. It is an outdoor production. Thank you. We do it over 3 nights in May, the second weekend in May, and it is just such a blast. And I had a couple of students this year graduate from my mom's program, meaning they're graduating from my program as well. And I was so sad. I mean, I was happy for them. Obviously, they're moving on to high school. They're doing great things. I forgot to mention my mom's school goes through kindergarten through middle school, so it ends at middle school. And I was so sad. I was like, I want to keep teaching you. Like, I've just started. I've invested all this time into teaching you, but you're going off into the world, and that's great, but I would still love to be able to, be in your orbit in some way and be able to teach you more about theater and, teach more about directing and choreography if they're interested, that kind of thing. And so I went to my mom and I was like, I am really thinking about doing something, because I've almost I've been rebitten by the bug, like I was in 4th grade. And I just felt like I wanted to bottle up this magical feeling. I literally said to her, before any of this branding or slogan came about that I'll tell you in a second, I literally said to her, I said, I want to catch this lightning and put it in a bottle, because this is such a feeling that I wish I could just open and then pour out and share with the world. And it's unlike anything else. I absolutely adore my professional career in public relations and marketing. I have so much passion for that, but there is something about theater that's so innate in me because I did it in childhood. I think we all have that thing that just sparks joy no matter what. And I said that to her, and she was like, I think that if that's what you're feeling, that you need to go for it because life's too short. You're not guaranteed tomorrow. So why would you be fearful of starting something that you know you want to do and it will make you happy and it will make everyone else happy too and they want it. So I was like, okay, thanks, Mom. Moms are great. I was like, that's perfect. That's honestly what I needed. So at that time, I was kind of brainstorming like what that would look like. And I was outside, and it was late May because it was after Lion King. And in the distance, I saw like, it looked like hundreds of fireflies. And I immediately started to feel nostalgic because here in the South, at least, we call them lightning bugs, but I digress. We, in the summer, have so many good memories of catching fireflies in mason jars and punching holes in them so they can breathe and we can keep them. And it honestly like reminded me of how quick and fleeting childhood is, but it's in those important moments you have to bottle up the spark and childlike wonder that you have when you are a kid. And so it just felt right. And so I decided I wanted it to be called Firefly Creative, and I wanted the slogan to be Catch Lightning in a Bottle, because catching lightning in a bottle is accomplishing something that is extremely difficult, but also, like I said, bottling up that special energy that we have when we are kids or when we embrace being like a child. So from there, I was like, but what do I want to do? I don't really want to do any more main stage productions. I'm happy with the one a year that we do, but I want to do something. And I remember that when I was in high school and middle school, I had done these incredible school tours, meaning I had gotten into these shows with fellow homeschoolers, but also adults as well. And we had put on productions or musicals to be able to take to schools, libraries, community centers. And it was everything that makes me excited. It had theater, it had community engagement, it had logistics, it had, marketing and public relations because, there's so much, engagement there with a lot of stakeholders. So it made me extremely excited because, our boundaries being we don't have a stage in the sense like we literally performed the show in our driveway really made us what we are and what we are unique. And another boundary meaning like we're homeschoolers, but a lot of my students really like to do sports. They like to do music. They like to do other things. And sometimes those things take place at night. So they weren't really looking for an opportunity that would take their nights away. However, I was like, would you be open to performing like on Fridays through the spring and we could take it to schools and community centers just like I did in high school? And the last one I did was in junior year of high school. I was the tour manager and I had gone and actually done all the logistics. I had worked with the schools and learned how to do that. And I realized I still had that skill set because I parlayed that skill set into my career, into PR and marketing. So I was like, this seems like kismet. So I decided we were going to do Schoolhouse Rock. I talked to the students who I wanted to be in it this year because we're piloting it, and it just has gone gangbusters thus far. We start rehearsals this next Tuesday, but we're already booking venues left and right. I have some extremely exciting venues and some really cool ones down the pike that I have talked to, and a lot of potentials that I'm very, very excited about. I think that it's going to be one of those moments where I've had a lot of the moments even through starting this that I'm like, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I wouldn't have ever imagined it. So that's Firefly. Super excited about it.
I love that. And I really love that you've been able to take, your theater background, that you've been able to take what you've been doing for years, but expand it further, but then also make it more you.
Right. And I feel like I've been learning that the jobs that I have or the opportunities that I've been given are not in a vacuum, meaning there are so many skills that cross over to different jobs that I have. Like I'm not doing PR and marketing by doing Firefly because so many of the skills that I've learned in college, I can already tell. Like because in junior year in high school when I did this job, I didn't have that knowledge. I didn't have those experiences. So now looking forward to what I'm doing in the role now to be a tour manager, I'm like I have so much more in my toolbox. And I have so much more experiences that I first and foremost know you have not because you ask not, and a lot of it I learned that during Icon last year, and so it's been creating a lot more opportunities because I have just been asking because the worst thing they can say is no.
That is so true. And I like too that you're mentioning that that even with your own personal development, that of course, while you still love, like for instance, of course, public relations and marketing, that's what you got a degree in, and and all of these other stuff. That doesn't mean that you can't do some of these other ventures and still find that childhood joy that you had. And I know for myself in my master's program, we spent quite a bit of time in one of our classes. I believe for us that was Com 601, where we learned a lot. We spoke a lot about like some of our childhood habits, and then relate it back to, is that still in your life now? And it was so interesting looking at that assignment, because it's just like, oh well, yeah, of course some of the stuff is still there. We're still us, but seeing how interesting and somewhat scary it is that's like, oh my gosh, I still do some of these things. And maybe it's in a different way that we've evolved our passion in it, but it's still us.
I 100% agree. I think that it's so important to stay in touch with that because when I graduated high school and went into PR and marketing, I almost forgot theater. Like it almost was a way to move on. It was almost like to do marketing and PR, I had to shed that theater personality, that theater, experience because that had been my whole life. Like I was homeschooled, so doing theater had been me. Like there was no other like big personality or, other attributes of me than theater. So I had to kind of like shed it to be able to like learn more about myself and evolve and do PR and marketing and do my degree and stuff like that. So getting back in touch with that, with this other knowledge and with the other, like the person that I am now was certainly interesting and makes me feel like I'm filling my cup. And something that I've also realized this year is that there is a misconception that one thing fills your cup, but I think it's many different things that fills my cup at least. And I think that's true for a lot of people. Like there's not one job that's just going to make you completely satisfied. It might be that job and then another side hustle that you're doing, or just another passion project that you're doing on the side, or a podcast that you're doing, or something, cooking every night, something like that that's going to make you have a beautiful life. And that's not just one singular thing, at least for me. Maybe it is for some people.
Oh, 100%. And I was just thinking about that the other day, actually, in the regards of going through, like job applications and everything, some of the joys of finishing grad school. But it's so interesting. It's just like, well, some of these things I could easily see myself putting my own spin on it. But in some ways, it's just like, it's like nothing gives me as much joy as what I'm doing right now, which is all of my hopes and dreams. And so it is like almost that bittersweet moment. It's like, wow, I'm doing everything I want to do right now. But in the same regard, too, it's also like I'm so excited for what the future has to hold and how I'm able to continue to, grow new skills and interests while also honing in on, the ones that make me who I am.
Yeah, and I think it's sometimes hard to communicate that to people, especially when we live in or at least work in a profession, and this is no shade at all, but it's just, you have someone come up to you and be like, "What are you doing now?" It's like, well, it's kind of complicated because like five things make me happy right now. It's not just like one job that I can be like, "Oh, I'm doing this and it's my dream." It's amazing. I love it. It's I'm doing this, and this, and each one of those things makes me happy in a certain way, that's hard to explain. And it's hard to, tell people that you are extremely happy. And like you said, doing exactly what you want to be doing right now, but it didn't look how you wanted it to, but you're happy how it is.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things too where sometimes it's also important for us to like push outside our comfort zone as well. And even like something that I've always said is that, whether it comes to personal interests or maybe job professions or even some friendships for that matter, is that if it's true to you, it's going to come back. It may take a little while, but I personally would like to believe that it comes back in some fashion, whether directly or indirectly.
Yeah. I'm also just a huge fan of like my life in chapters or like my life in eras. And, of course, like last year I was in a different era than I am now. And there's been a couple eras in between, or chapters, however you want to call it. And it's hard to explain what we're talking about, like, filling your cup in certain different ways when you are, there's often that times of like, you need to show, don't tell. But it's hard to do that when you're in a tell era because you can't show it yet. Like, I would say 2024, I was just thinking about this the other day, has been a lot of working in the shadows behind the scenes for me in preparation for a year where I will be more, demonstrative, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I completely understand that. And since you were mentioning like the different eras that we're in, where would you say that you are right now? And then I guess after that, where would you say you are in comparison to where were last year and 5 days ago?
Whew, that's a good question. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I actually had a guest speaking opportunity 2 weeks ago with Monmouth University, and I did my talk on what's now, or what's next is what's now. And let me explain that. So last year, when I was on this podcast and after Icon and during that whole stage of my life, I was very focused on what's next. I was about to graduate. I was about to, go out into the world, ceremoniously, I thought. I thought it was going to be this wonderful bookend to a chapter, and I would start a new one, and it would start extremely well. Like, there would be a great hook, there would be a great job, there would be a great something. But, that didn't necessarily happen. There was a lot of disappointment at the beginning of this year, and not in any sort of like sad way. It was just not what I expected at all. Like, I had gone for certain opportunities and I had dove headfirst into them. I thought I had worked harder than I ever had, and I think at the time I had, and they just weren't meant for me. And I had to accept that. I had to be okay with that. It took some time, but ultimately I was so focused on the future, and I thought I knew what the future was. So I would say now, if I was to name this chapter, I would say it would be called now or present, because I'm literally just living day by day, and I'm the happiest I've ever been.
I love that. I love that. And I feel like what you were saying too is, about, diving headfirst into, like I said, your plans, your hopes for the future,
Mm-hmm.
and then not being able to get that, but then having to move on to that. Yeah, it's so interesting too, because I feel like for us, and even speaking for myself in other different ways, it's just that I feel like there's certain ways that sometimes once we get something in our head that we're going to fight for it, we're going to try to do it, we're going to do our best to achieve it despite the odds. And I mean, as for me, as someone that loves, media, like, don't you always love those TV shows where like the underdogs win and like the outcome that has no probability of happening just happens?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely interesting because you work so hard for something, and when you don't get it, there is a certain peace after a while once you reflect. Like, at least in my circumstances, for some of the opportunities that I wasn't able to get that I really thought I might have gotten, I was like, but I really wasn't meant to get that. Like, they that was a good call on the universe behalf. Yeah, you know what I mean? Because like, if I had gotten certain opportunities, I wouldn't be where I am today.
100%. And yeah, and to finish up what I was saying for the for the media example, for going to my own example, is that like in media, I feel like what's interesting is especially for me that loves sitcoms, is that I feel like you almost get the stronger episodes and stronger character development when when the character that you were rooting for does not get what they were looking for. That you
Mhm.
take the whole next season, you see their growth, their redevelopment, the
Right.
struggles, but then they become stronger characters because of that. Um, and I think even for myself, going in high school, when I was in eighth grade, I really, really, I was at a STEM magnet school at the time. But for high school, I wanted to go to the one for the communication theater arts. I wanted to be in their communication program. Um, and I figured, well, yeah, I'd gotten, mostly all A's, occasional, B's in middle school. I had pretty good
Mhm.
attendance. I was determined. It's just like, I know I'm going to get it. It's my zone school anyway, right? And then
Yeah.
seeing everyone in the hallway be like, yes, I got accepted, even. And then for me, getting waitlisted twice, it's just like, for school I was going to go to anyway. It's like, oh my gosh, like this feels so defeating as a lottery system, in case you're wondering. But in the same regard, it allowed for me to focus on personal development for a while, and then be a part of a video production program that I'm still a part of now, and it's become an integral part of my life. And that wouldn't have
Yeah.
happened if I would have been accepted.
Yeah. And I have this friend, and she has this great metaphor that I use quite often about life being like a quilt. And sometimes in certain seasons, you don't get the beauty of the patch that's currently being woven. And it's very confusing. You're like, how does this patch contribute to the overall design? But once it's done and it's in the quilt, you realize that it was essential. It it was needed, and it was beautiful in the rest of the design, and it starts to make sense. And I think you could even equate that to like your sitcom analogy. Like you're in the middle of a season and you're starting to wonder what where are the writers going with this, and how is this going to contribute to the overall series? But at the end of it, oftentimes, if it's a good sitcom, hopefully it is, you go, oh, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. I think that's the same thing in starting like the things that I'm starting to understand, that like those early stages of this year, that difficult patch was really beautiful in the rest of the design.
I mean, that is so true. And I wanted to ask you too. So during this time that you were, in this difficult patch, how long did it take for you to try to, I guess, take the other side of this, to realize the opportunities that that you had, and the other opportunities to come? Because I know, I'm sure for you, it's probably like a quick turnaround uh, where you had to be accepting of it, but in the same regard, it still takes a while for you to be able to process that, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think travel helped a lot with that. It wasn't an escape, it was more of a way to learn and reflect. And it worked out that this year I had a lot of travel planned. And I can talk a bit more about that and why I think that's beneficial to my life. But I think that, at the beginning of the year, I think all came to fruition towards the middle of March. And the rest of March was pretty rough. And April, I started to get a little bit better, started to reflect a little bit more. But it wasn't until May that I had finally accepted that I was just okay and everything was going to be fine. And it was at that point that I accepted that I found a renewed sense of purpose with Firefly. But it didn't go hand in hand. It wasn't like I'm okay because I have a purpose. It was I'm okay, and then the universe was like, here, now that you've learned that lesson, here's this wonderful, beautiful thing that you're going to go with now.
100%. And yeah, and I have and for me, definitely have a story that I'm going to say for a little bit later. I mean, in terms of the universe sort of speaking to me this August. But I did want to fast forward a little bit. because I do want to hear about your travels. But I actually wanted to ask about the classes that you're teaching.
Oh, absolutely. So I was a graduate assistant in college, in graduate school, and I started as a teaching assistant and just fell in love with the idea of wanting to be a professor or an adjunct more so. I think I talked about this last year. I wanted to go into academia. I decided I didn't want to. Yada yada yada. Different story. Go to that episode if you want to learn about that. But so I really realized I wanted to teach because that was such an important part of my high school experience was teaching theater, and learned that I really enjoyed that. But I also learned in high school or in college that I enjoyed teaching beyond just theater. I wanted to teach, my profession. I wanted to teach graphic design or public relations. And so when I was in graduate school, I had the opportunity to teach 2 semesters worth of my own classes during my last year. And then I parlayed that into an adjunct professor role this last January and taught 2 classes. Thank you. And then this year, there goes my dogs. Sorry. This year, I started teaching in person again since graduate school, and it's been wonderful. I love my students. I love teaching. I love the class that I teach. I teach graphics for strategic media, so we use Canva to accomplish brochures, flyers, social media posts, video, all types of different media, and it really is a great launching pad for their career because we also work on their portfolio websites, their resumes, their business cards, anything visual in their personal brand we handle, and also dealing with brands. And a lot of times I have students from different disciplinaries. So marketing, I have a lot of students from, oh, hello, dog. I have students from, political science or history, or it runs the gamut. So a lot of times this is a great introduction point to how PR and marketing works. And sometimes I get them to switch over, which is fun.
Well, that's first of all nice that you were able to have some converts over.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm like, come over to the dark side of PR.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And yeah, and I'm so glad to hear that you've been enlightened about that you've been enjoying your experience. Because I know, so when we spoke last year, I know that you'd spoken a lot about some of the passions that you'd gotten from teaching, but then ultimately decided that, I'm done with that. I'm done with academia. I'm graduating. I'm done. And so what shifted for that, for you since our previous conversation?
I just realized I didn't like research. I mean, it's simple. I just realized I did research for research's sake. I think I think research is incredibly important. I think it is incredibly, incredibly important. It's just not something that I am personally passionate about. I'm a creative, I'm a teacher, and I have to lean heavily into that to fill my cup. And research does not fill my cup. So that was really it. I just didn't want to be in academia. I realized that I would work as a professional in the field in some regard, in some way, and then teach as a passion project. Because, I mean, I'm not getting rich off of adjunct professorship, but it's making me very happy. And I think that's what matters.
I love that. I love that. And yeah, and I like what you're saying about research too, because, having just done my master's thesis and that whole process, which itself was a journey in of itself, the ups and downs of that earlier this year. But, I don't know, it gave me a different appreciation and a different perception of my graduate study time. And I mean, not necessarily like better or worse, just a different perception of it than, of it. I guess the whole completing of it, but allowed for some amazing full circle moments. But nevertheless, though, like now for myself as a adjunct instructor, it's like I love it. I love what I do, and for me, I like the concept of research, but in my personal mental thought is like I'd love to present the idea and give it to someone else to research.
Yeah, and I had a problem too, like having to do research because, like, when you're in academia, you are, that's part of your job, and I am of the belief that research should come about when it's timely and when it feels right for you. I'm just an artist in that way. I'm like, when it, when it goes with the flow, that kind of thing. And so I'm just like, I don't want to feel like I have to do research when it's just research for research's sake. It's just to feel like, just to do the bottom line, or it's just to check off a box. You know what I mean?
Oh, 100%. 100%. And yeah, and so even like I said, definitely if everyone know about my journey, you can feel free to ask about that at some point. But I mean, I know even for myself, I 100% agree, because I feel like, well, it's nice, of course, in classes you have to practice the research because it is an important skill to have. But in the same regard, I just don't ever want to do anything just because it's a thing I have to do. I mean, as opposed to this is genuine. I'm passionate about this, and I know now most removed from having finished my degree, I now am starting to get a passion for writing again. Maybe not 100% pure academic writing, but just writing in general. And so it feels almost like I don't know. I feel like in my life right now, I am where it's almost like when the superhero ends the movie and uses all of their strength to do the one thing, defeat the villain, and now I'm like the 3 months after that where you're building your strength back up to prepare for the next movie.
Yeah, you're in the epilogue.
Yeah, so it's like, well, there's not quite a story about this yet, but why not make it a story?
Exactly. I feel like everyone has an interesting thesis story if they've done it. I certainly did. I think I might have talked about it last year. So I won't repeat myself, but I'd love to hear about your thesis journey, whether now or later.
Yeah, definitely. I might say for a little later, in the episode, but but I did actually want to ask about your travels though, because I know you've had quite a bit of travels this year. At least as I've been, as we've been keeping along, and I love our pen pal sort of conversations we've been having all year.
Me too. Yeah, travel has been amazing. I had a friend, honestly, it was the same friend who has, the patchwork metaphor. She's very wise. But in high school, when she was my theater director, she said one of the most beneficial experiences as a director for me was traveling at a young age and experiencing life, because so much of theater is storytelling and depicting life. But if you're only in theater, how do you know about life? Or if you're only storytelling, how do you know about life? So it's important to have experiences outside of storytelling to be able to tell stories better. And I think that's where my travels have come in. I've had some great opportunities, once in a lifetime opportunities, that a lot of places I might not ever go back to, just because life happens and things start, and you're in opportunities. So I really wanted to take that time that I had to be able to explore as much as possible, and I'll try to continue to do that in some ways, but it just might not be as often, or as expansive as it has been in the past, because I did have some sort of liminal space year, a kind of a reset, like I said, behind the scenes, working in the shadows, and I had time to reflect and travel and learn about people and learn about the world and learn about where my place is in that, how this country's place is in that, and I just learned a lot, and I feel like every trip I was almost hesitant to go on, because I'm kind of missing home a little bit. But every time I was on it or at the end of it, I was so glad that I did it, because I had come back with a book full of ideas and renewed sense of purpose, lessons learned, people met, connections, that kind of thing. So I regret nothing, and I absolutely adored all my experiences this year.
I love that. And are you able to tell us a little bit about what some of your travels were, and what some of your favorites were, if you have any favorite?
Yeah, so I always gravitate towards Europe as being my favorite. That was probably the most. It was definitely the most expansive and the most reflective trip, and it came at a very important time, because it was right after I had started the idea of Firefly. But I went to Europe for a month with my cousin, And we started in London, and then we went to Barcelona. I think we did Cardiff right after that. Or we did that in between. We did Barcelona, and then we did the south of Spain, and then we went into Morocco. And that's where I celebrated my 23rd birthday, which was really neat and was not on my bingo card at all. And then from Morocco, we went to Florence, which I studied abroad there 2 years ago in college and just absolutely fell in love with it. And to go back was such a unique and very cool experience, very full circle from just the 2 years. And then we went to Naples, and that's where my mom and her mom, my cousin, my aunt, met us. And then we did Naples, Rome, and then we finished in Florence. And then we came home, and it was fantastic. There was so many reflection points in that trip. I wrote a lot during that trip. I like to write in my free time, whether it goes anywhere or it doesn't. And I wrote a lot on that trip. So that was probably my favorite. And then a close second would be my trip to Peru. I took a trip to Peru this last month, and it was so amazing. I went with a company. It was like a group travel thing, so I went by myself. But I made so many friends, and I learned so much. It was such a different culture. And that was something that I said when I came home from Europe was my next trip. I really want to go to a culture that's wildly different, because European culture is different from America, but there are some similarities. It's not like a major culture shock, but Peru in some ways was. It's a very different culture. And I had met people from Peru through PRSSA, so that was really cool. I kind of knew what I was walking into sometimes, like a little bit. But yeah, and then I took several trips here and there domestically, whether for work or for pleasure, and they all were just absolutely wonderful. I really enjoyed Seattle. I loved that. I loved. I'm trying to think what else domestically I went to. What did I do? I'm blanking on domestic travel this year. A lot of them was short weekend trips. Oh, California. I love California anytime I get to go out there. So it is always a pleasure. So yeah, I mean, it's been a great year, and I'm incredibly grateful. I don't take one moment for granted.
I love that. And I did want to ask too, since you mentioned Peru, and of course for you PRSSA, that you've met some people there. Did you have a chance to meet any of them in person?
Oh no! So we had planned on it, but since I was in this group travel thing, I didn't realize that it was going to be a rigid schedule, and I wasn't going to be able to break away from the group really at any point, which was not really a problem, because there's not a lot of reasons I would want to break off from the group, because not many people know people in Peru. That's the great thing about PRSSA. It gives you that cool opportunity. So I was only in Lima, where the Peru folks are, and I was only there for like a day. And so I couldn't make it work with breaking off from the group. And so I felt terrible, but I really wanted to meet them. But I saw them in Icon, and they gave me a little llama, so it was great.
I love that. And I did want to ask, so how was it going to Icon 2024? I know that for 2023, when we last spoke, you had just returned back from there, and that you were part of the planning committee. So how did it feel now, just being another person?
It was wonderful, honestly, because this was my first Icon without any major responsibilities. The first Icon that I went to in Dallas, I didn't have any job, but I knew at the time we were planning to bid for the next year. So I was in kind of that mode. I was in that headspace of being critical of everything, so I could write down, what I thought that could improve next year. And then, of course, the following year we hosted, and that was a whirlwind experience. And then this year, I didn't have any major ties. I'm not on the national committee anymore. I am not on the conference committee. I merely helped the conference committee in some ways, just through support and moral, cheering on, that kind of thing. And so attending as a professional and as a student was just cool. It was great. I mean, at some points it was weird, because it was okay, give me a job. I like went up to Janine, who runs PRSSA, and her staff, Ben and Jessica. I went up to them multiple times, was just like, can I help you with anything? Like, I just love a job. I love a task, that kind of thing. It makes me feel less awkward. So please just give me anything at any point. And so they did a couple of times, but like for the most part, I was just chilling and helping wherever I could.
Did it feel weird at all to to not be on the stage and not have like an influx of people coming up to you? Although given how popular that you are, I'm sure that there were still quite a bit of people who wanted a picture with you at some point in time or another.
um, as far as being on stage, no, it wasn't weird at all. Like I had so many friends who were doing that this year because I had either helped them, like Olivia McCurdy, who's in the role that I was in, by VP of Chapter Development. I had so much communications with her throughout the last year that I just was so excited for her. And then of course, one of my good friends, Ro Lane, she is on the national committee too, and she's from University of Memphis. And so I was just so excited to see our school represented further on the national committee. And then I'm just so proud of her journey and where she's going. So I was just so excited. And then, of course, Millie Milagros, I was so wildly excited. One of my good friends as well, just to see her in action. And so there was never any moment of like, man, I wish I was on stage or I wish I was doing this. You know what I mean? It was just like so exciting for the people that I treasure and the people that I've made such good connections with. I was just so excited for them. I did speak in one session. It was the first session of Icon. It was on chapter development that Olivia McCurdy, she ran, and I was on stage with two other members from chapters. And so that was really interesting. It was basically a panel discussion, but it was just Q&A questions. Like people came up to the mic and asked a bunch of questions. And so we just went through those. And so that was really cool. And it was just interesting to experience Icon from the other side of the table.
Well, I'm glad that you were able to have this experience, where you have the last year of the time of intensive work, going there and being back. And this time you got to sort of relax a little bit and, just be a normal person, so to speak.
Yeah, and really learn too, because when you're hosting the conference, you can't really process anything that the speakers are saying because you're thinking about the next thing, or you're thinking about this accommodation that the student asked for, or you're thinking about the volunteers that are at the hospitality desk, or you're thinking about did I give the thank you note to the speaker? You know what I mean? Like you're always you're going. So even when you're sitting and you're listening to something, it's going in one ear and out the other. So this year it was actually really interesting. I was like, man, Icon really is great. Like, I really got to learn a lot from these professionals and from the students as well. Just like, wow, this is a great value,
That's great. And how did it feel for you? I mean, in terms of, I know, of course, when we last spoke, I know you're finishing up your time in graduate school. Now, even though you finished that, you're now working on a graduate certificate. And so you still get to be a little bit of a student, but then you're also a bit more on the professional side than you were last year.
Yeah, it's great. I never want to stop learning. And I think that can manifest as different ways. Like right now, I'm getting to a point where I feel a little burnt out from school and from, doing assignments. Like I love my class, but every time I have to do an assignment, I'm kind of like, I don't really want to do this anymore. Whereas like a year ago, I was like gung ho, like so ready to do it. And it's not that I feel like I'm not learning anymore, because I am. It's just that I think I've reached a point in my life where I don't need to be in a class every day or every, even once a week. I feel like I can, take a break is what I'm saying. And I know that I will eventually probably come back to it in some way, or maybe get another degree or just take classes for fun, just because I do love learning. I know that's a part of me intrinsically, but right now I think that I need to take a break after this, which is good because it's my last class.
Well, since you mentioned it's your last class, will you be finished with the certificate in December?
Yes, so I will. Yeah, I'll finish this semester and then I'll get my certificate in December, January. And the certificate is in social media analysis and analytics. I think that's what they call it. I can't remember.
And when you get there, in December or January, like, are you ready for it to no longer have the title of student formally for now?
I think I've been weaning off of it, so I'm hoping like that it kind of gets out my body of saying like, "Hi, I'm Oakley Weddle and I'm a graduate student," which I've been saying for the last 2 years, or I'm a student at the University of Memphis, which I've been saying for the last 4 years. So it'll be interesting. But at the beginning of the episode, I started to say it. I'm like, but wait, I kind of am, but I'm kind of not. So I'm trying to wean off of it. But I think it'll be an interesting transition, but one that I'm very excited about.
Well, I'm certainly excited to hear for you how you're able to of course finish that class while also teaching your classes and running two nonprofits among the many other things that you do that fill your cup.
Right, exactly. I'm excited too. I'm excited to hear about all the things that fill your cup as well.
Yeah, and if you're interested, we can go right on into that.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so in that case, I actually want to flip this and say, what questions do you have, for me in regards to that? Because I know that, like I said, we've been excited to catch up for a little while, but I know our schedules have both been all over the place this year.
Well, let me turn the tables on you. So I'll ask you a question that you asked me because I think that this is very insightful, and I think it's great. So you last year interviewed me, and so I was curious, in the same question that you asked me, like, what would you have called that chapter of your life then, and then what would you call it now, and what have you learned in between, and why the change?
Ooh, that's a fascinating one. So, naming. I usually am either really good at naming or really hesitant. But I would say last year, I considered that year almost the middle, like the middle of a book. And so for me, I'm very, I guess, keen on like sort of identifying where these different years are within the current game plan of my life right now. And so like for instance in 2020 I would say that I wanted that to be a new decade, a new experience. 2021 I wanted it to make it the most productive year ever. 2022 would that one I wanted to finish out what I was working on. I wanted to finish out strong. So actually, I'd say 2023 was starting off confident. I would say that with starting, this podcast over, and starting with number one all over again after having already done 250 episodes. When we spoke, we were on number 42. And so going through that year was so interesting because I just started my graduate program in January 2023. I started a graduate assistantship as well. That it was sort of like starting over, but starting over with the knowledge that I already had.
Right.
Like I had just finished my bachelor's degree in December 2022, and then starting the graduate program right where I left off. I mean, I was already 2 classes in by the time I started, and so that whole year had been so fascinating because I was really learning so much. And it was like, I got to be a graduate assistant, graduate teaching assistant, got to help a few classes throughout that year. I got to take baby steps towards my thesis, had a whole summer 2023 of thesis writing that may or may not have actually been needed. But
it's not always.
Yeah. That was funny because for that year, that summer, I was in a thesis prep class, but I spent the whole summer writing the basis of my thesis to realize that by the end of it, that's apparently I didn't need to have done that. So, oops.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, though, made me more prepared, I suppose. But yeah, I would say last year was almost starting off strong. And 2024, I feel like can be best described as using the resources available to me and making the most of them.
Right.
That's what I would say, because I really tried to navigate this year by building on the foundation I started last year and figuring out, okay, now that I've done this for a year, what can I do? What can I improve? What can I change? And who do I want to become? And actually, if you were to ask me about what helped drive the first part of this year was actually our conversation from last year.
Really? In what way?
So you were speaking a lot last year about the journey of what happens next after you graduate and what you wanted to do afterwards. And I was thinking a lot about it, about what I wanted to do for 2024. And it was so interesting because I was thinking a lot about it. Just like, what do I want to do next? And then it also made me think of, what do I want to do now? And so I think that was my overall thought for quite a bit of the first part of 2024 is like, okay, I'm in my last semester of my graduate program. What can I do to make this the best year yet? And accomplish my goals, but not burn myself out.
Right. Yes. Yes. And I think that's what I was trying to communicate to some of the students at Icon, and when I had a chance to speak to Monmouth, was like, there's nothing wrong with planning. Like, setting goals is wonderful. It's just it shouldn't all be about focusing on what's next, or solely focusing on what's next, rather. You have to have a balance of next and now, like, the yin yang kind of thing. Like, and yeah, it's you have to have that balance, but also thinking of like, the future, it might not look exactly like you want it to, and being okay with that. So I definitely, I think that's interesting that, you were thinking so much about what's next. And I also was trying to communicate to them, like what you said, utilizing the time that you have. I told them, I was like, college is not a prison sentence. You should be using it as like, you should leverage it. Like, you should use the resources that you have as a student, because once you're out of school and you're no longer a student, you're not treated the exact same. Like, you're treated now as a professional, that you should, get it together, because you are now out of school. You have a degree, maybe even 2 degrees. So now you're like, okay, what's next? So taking advantage of school when you're in it is definitely
100%. Yeah. Were there any other questions that you had for me?
Yeah, I was curious about, like, how do you reflect? Because, like, is it completely internal thoughts, or do you, because I take a different approaches, like writing. Sometimes I'll do poems, or, sometimes I'll even like write music. Like, I used to write a lot of music to reflect. I don't do it as much anymore, but sometimes it manifests in different ways, or journaling. So how do you reflect?
That's a good question. So I would say that I have a few different ways, I guess, multimodal in that regard. But for me, I really love traditional, journaling. The lovely journal I have here, I've had so many. That one has so many blank pages, but nevertheless, I do my best to try to, reflect as much as I can. And again, after my whole thesis process and that story, which I'm sure will probably be what you ask next. But yeah, after all of that, I was so tired of writing in a sense. And so I actually switched over from not just always physically writing as much as I love, but I've also been doing a lot of personal documentation as well, whether that is, maybe doing activities or vlogging or whatever the case may be, something to document the now, so I can look back and reflect on the good moments and the not so good moments, because I feel like they all have a place, and to just eliminate one and not the other. I've grown up wanting to be a honest communicator, and I don't ever want to say, oh well, I was able to do 2 degrees in 4 years and look at me now. Like, I don't want to do that. I want to be like, okay, not to sound bad, but it's like, I want to highlight all my struggles, not to make you feel pity, but rather to tell the full story. I don't ever want to misrepresent who I am.
Right, because you're a real person, and we all have struggles, and we're not just a resume.
Yes. And speaking of resume, I can never manage to put resumes in the exact way that I want them, because they ask for so little information, but information that I feel like isn't as relevant if you really want to get to know who I am.
Yeah, and I tell my students that all the time. I'm like, you will literally update this 1,000,000 times. This is just the first go at it,
100%.
because it's a living document. It's always changing. But anyway, so addressing your thesis, what was that, and what did it teach you?
Oh, that's a good one. So, first of all, I did my thesis on television sitcom revivals, and it was a passion project and a personal passion, personal, and professional project all in one, which made it all the more better and all the more hard. To backtrack a little bit, as you know, I love media, I love learning, and television sitcoms are sort of my forte. It originally didn't start off as my thesis topic. I didn't have a thesis topic, but given that I did sort of my master's degree out of order, so to speak, I did the electives first, and then when I was still an undergrad, and then I came in full time in January 2023, and the two of the classes, well, one of the classes I had was the last of the introductory requirement classes. So the way that you normally would have taken it is that this is your second semester, halfway through the program, and you know what your thesis should be. Whereas for me, I was in my first semester of full-time work, and it's like, okay, what are you thinking about your thesis for? It's like, I just started yesterday. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so at the time, I just went through some of my mom's VHS tapes. I love VHS. I love the medium. All that to say, though, is that my paper for my one class, Column 605, ended up becoming the basis of my thesis. And whether intentionally, accidentally, or the world just telling me, this is what you need to be doing, I loved it. But going into January 2024, I didn't realize the timeline of it. I wasn't fully... Again, I obviously haven't written a master's thesis before. And so I came in thinking, okay, well, I wrote quite a bit in the summer. I didn't need to. But, it's like, okay, I have one semester. I graduate on May 3rd. So I have plenty of time. And so when I went to my first advising meeting, and it's like, oh, yeah, well, the deadline to actually have it submitted is like first, second week of March. And it's like, oh, dear.
Yeah, gotta get working.
Yeah, and then at the time too, because again I was doing my master's degree out of order, is that for my program, full time is 3 classes, which is 9 credit hours, and for me, I was also in this time also teaching a class online, asynchronous class for the first time, and so that was a new thing alongside all of my other jobs and podcasts and everything else, and so it was a tad overwhelming. And I think, not that I didn't acknowledge that it was a lot, but more so that I'm used to a lot. Like, I love being busy, but it was a little much.
Yeah, so, wow. What did you think, like, that experience, like, how did that experience help you now?
Yeah, that experience was, I think it helps me now because I know what I am capable of. One of the things I wrote in my thesis acknowledgement, or maybe it was in my dedication, I don't remember. I wrote paragraphs for it. Most people only write like a sentence or two, but I wrote paragraphs for one of them. And one of them, I said, this document is a testament that you could do anything that you put your mind to. And it's a two-layer, it's a double-edged sword in the way that I perceive that now. And even when I was writing it. So to backtrack a little bit. So I had worked on my master's thesis in January and February. I submitted in the end of February. But then I was told that it's great writing, but this is not thesis writing. And at the time that I was really getting this information was about 4 to 5 days before the deadline. So... lots of rewriting in a very short time.
Yeah, that's a lot. Oh my gosh, 5 days before?
Yeah, and this is during spring break too.
Oh, so, did you take all night? It's like, you were up late, I'm sure.
Yeah, and so for me, it took a lot of strength and willpower, but I was determined to get it done, and I got it done. But then the question was, at what cost?
Oh, yes. We've talked about this.
Yeah, and so...
Yeah. It's intense. Like, I didn't end up finishing my thesis because I realized that the cost was too big. And it was a mental health thing. And I never prioritized that, which at that time, and I'm still very proud of just being like, no... I'm going to do this other thing, or I'm going to do these other things. And like I said over email when we were writing about this, it's like, I think that a thesis is so wildly impressive, and I congratulate you for doing it. It wasn't something that was in my cards. So I'm very, very impressed. I think that's amazing.
Thank you. And yeah, it was so interesting because I was really determined to get it done, to graduate on time in May. But in the same regard, even the pacing for those 4 days were just so off, that when I turned everything in, it was just like, okay. Like, in fact, when I turned everything in, I didn't even realize about some of the style guidelines and some of this other stuff, um, but I went to New York a few days afterwards, which was nice since I missed spring break, writing my thesis, or rewriting it. All the stuff was there. It was just in the wrong orders. So, and the wording was really like this. It was sort of like the concepts are there, but it wasn't a lot of clarity per se in what I want to do.
Right.
Perhaps because of my numerous varied interests, and the way I wrote it. But all that to say, though, is in terms of what it taught me, when I was preparing for the defense, after the defense, which, long story short for that, is that my voice actually went out in the time from finishing the thesis or getting back from New York to about an hour before the thesis defense. So I didn't have a chance to even verbally practice any of it. Like, I was just, it's like I knew what I was going to say, and I hoped that my voice was back in time to speak about it, and it did, thankfully, because that was about a 2-hour process. But all that to say, though, is afterwards in making, styling everything properly and writing my acknowledgement. I remember I wrote, this is a testament to my interest and to that you can do anything that you accomplish. But I mean, you accomplish anything that you set your mind to. But which is something I've always believed, that I could accomplish anything. But the question is, should I?
That's interesting. I wanna like fast forward a little bit because I have this question I want to ask you. What was going through your mind on the day of graduation?
Oh, that was an interesting one. So for me, at that point in time, I had, of course, finished my thesis defense. I had finished everything for that. I had finished my final class, which was the last introductory class, the hardest class yet, because I had a lot of statistics stuff, which my mind wasn't fully there to do that because I was, of course, working on the thesis. But at that point in time, we had only finished things by days when I graduated on May 3rd, which was a Friday. And my mental hope was that going into it was going to be better than my undergrad graduation. Nothing wrong with it, the undergrad one. It was more so that I didn't know anybody there. And obviously, having graduated high school in COVID, in the pandemic, I didn't really get the chance to see my peers for the high school one. And it was, of course, with social distancing. And so going into my undergrad one, I was just like, well, I don't know anybody here. They said sit with your friends. So it's not even like alphabetical order. It's just like, I don't know these people. I had a chance to meet some of them during the line procession, but this was a fun experience being able to see everybody in person for the final time. So I actually had like my cohort with us. So we all got to be together. My family was there. So I was very excited for the graduation because I've been looking forward to it for so long. But in the same regard, it's like this is the last time that I am going to be here as a student. I'm going to be back at the university, but it's like as a student, this is going to be one of my last times here. And so I was really looking forward again to being with my cohort, being there with everyone. But in the same regard, it's just like, I don't know what's next. But in the same regard, it's like, do I care what's next, really? I kind of want to enjoy the now a little bit more. And I was just like, you know what? I don't even want to do any job applications or anything until after. Well, I don't want to start the next chapter of my life until after my birthday in August. It's just like, I just want to take the time that I have and make the most of it because this is the most free time I'll ever have for a while. But I remember ending out graduation day being a little disappointed, only because I don't know, because this was such a closing of the chapter moment, I wanted in my mind, again, I'm a sitcom person, the like how all of those shows they have everyone reflecting, and all of these flashback scenes that you get to see. And the like, wow, you remember when we just started a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and now we're here. No, most of the chat was like, you know, like, is everything straight for the cap and gown, or it's I'm ready to get out of here, and like we didn't have that sort of reflection moment that the TV shows have told me that we're going to have. But nevertheless, I'm so glad and honored to be with them, and it was such a monumental moment. But I remember leaving out, and it's just like, wow, that's it. That's
Yeah.
that's it. It's like I want to be a student again, but I need a break. But like this is the end of this chapter.
Yeah, totally. That's very interesting. Like similarly, like I was in disbelief in some ways when I was graduating. It was like, oh, this is over. No, it's probably not. But it really was. It was over, and I was no longer a student. And I also felt like during that time, I was so invested in looking forward to this one specific thing that didn't pan out. And that was kind of on my mind a lot during that day. And I kind of look back and been like, man, I wish I had just like been good with what I was given at that moment
Mm-hmm.
versus thinking about, okay, what's going to come in the spring? What's going to come next? And kind of hyping everything up and being like, the best is yet to come, which I still stand by. The best was yet to come. And I still think that. But yeah, that's it.
But yeah, I like what you're saying, that the best is yet to come, and I love that sentiment, because I feel like for all of us that at least in this point in time, of course, like you go through high school, like in grade school, and you go through it, and you're like, okay, well, obviously, I know I graduate at some point in time in my life, and then a lot of us we go to college. It's like, okay, well, this is a 4-year journey. We know that going into it. Some people take a little longer, some people take a little less, but we go into it with we know what's next in a sense. And even same with grad school. But then when you enter the real life, there is no end point really. You have retirement, but that we're decades away from that. So it's the question of enjoying that moment now and not just waiting until the end. Enjoying the moment, because it's one thing like high school. Okay, 4 years. Like I'm ready to graduate. It's like, okay, you have 4 years for that. College, you have almost 4 years for that, maybe a little more, a little less. If you count down to retirement from the day one, you're going to be counting for a long time, and
Yeah.
that's not worth it.
No, and I had a lot of people in my life when I was in high school and even starting college be like, college is the best years of your life. And halfway through, I was like, oh God, I hope not. I hope not. I'm broke, balling on a budget, all the things. Like, I mean, I very much enjoyed my college experience, but I am wildly optimistic that that is not the best 4 years of my life.
Oh my gosh, 100%. Yeah, and even going back to what I was saying about, this year gave me a different perspective of even my time in the master's program. For what it's worth, since you mentioned how was it after, graduation day, I would say that the day afterwards, I got a different appreciation for the whole process.
Mm.
Where, yeah, like even going back to, for me, like I said, for sitcoms, you can evaluate each individual episode, each individual season, but it's not until the series ends that you can fully appreciate what the series was.
Yeah.
And so for me, if anything, I think that it connected me back to my inner self. That it took me from the academic person I was, and I am, but sort of shaved away some of the necessities of academia, and took me back to I'm doing this because I love it and because this is me. That like I can look back at the goals I set for myself in 4th grade, in the school cafeteria, elementary school cafeteria, that I was just like, I'd planned my life back then. I was just like, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this, I want to do that. Well, those goals, of course, changed and evolved. But ironically, I'm now actually at those goals. That despite all the changes in my life, I'm at those goals. Not the middle school goals, not the high school goals, not the college, undergrad goals. I'm at my elementary goals, and I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, and that's kind of going back to the beginning of the conversation. It's like your childhood self. Like you knew yourself then, and I think the middle school, high school, college was a lot of changing yourself because you were not. I'm not saying you. I'm saying the hypothetical you.
Yeah.
Me, you, everyone. You were conforming or changing to meet others' expectations. And then now on the other side of it, when you're not around that, you're like, wow, my fourth grade self really had something going there. I mean, it's so funny that you say that because I found a note on my phone. It was like the first note, like, on the notes app of the iPhone, like the very first one. And it was like my life in stages up until like 2030. I had written down like what I want it to be. And there was a lot of things there that didn't necessarily pan out in the same timeline or the same way, but the gist of it, yeah, I kind of did know some direction. I had some direction, and I did want to ask you about, on the topic of change, the sitcoms, right? I've heard several comedians, people who have done sitcoms, say that the most successful sitcoms are the ones where characters don't change because a lot of the humor comes from their shtick, their thing, their like their general personality. Do you agree with that? And how does that relate to like your own life?
Ooh, that's such a fascinating question, and I almost have a two-layer answer to that. Yeah, as I'm also thinking of the answer as well. So for the ones that don't change, what's fascinating about that is, on one hand, I feel like so many shows, yeah, they change the show based off of the audience or the producer's perception of things. Like, you'll see the first episode, and then when you see the last episode, this character's dumber. This character is all of a sudden has a completely different personality. This one's age is completely different than what they originally were. They started off 16 and now they're somehow 30 in the course of 5 years. I mean, yeah, there's so many different things that can change. But in the same regard, I feel like for keeping some of the same, I feel like it's like it's a two layer question, because on the one hand, when it works, it works. But in the same regard, life has changed, and we have to take risk. Sometimes that might mean losing some of your original audience, or sometimes it might mean that you're not the same show that you once were. And
Right.
for me, having evaluated shows that have come back to life, what's interesting is a lot of these shows that come back to life are more aligned to the beginning of the original shows than they were to the end of the original. Because a lot of times, like, even that nostalgia factor, that what you remember is not always the same for what was.
Right.
In the sense that, like, you might have some show that started off at the beginning where we're just a show about average life. Well, then you might add a kid. Well, guess what? The kid is going to now be your life. And, I mean, it might work out for the show. The show might get easily canceled. I mean, but in the same regard, it provided a necessary change. And sometimes change is not what we needed. I mean, not what we think we want in our life, but what we need, for better or for worse. That it's almost necessary to test the waters. But it's such a, like I said, nuanced question, and I feel like it always depends show to show. But I've heard of me actually likes it when we allow change, because it allows us to test ourselves to see how strong are these characters, like how strong are they written, how strong are the personalities, are their acting abilities. That, I mean, because at the end of the day, it's storytelling. You know,
Yeah.
now whether or not you like the story or not is a completely different scenario. But I mean, it's so interesting because in the same regard, at some point in time, like for shows that stay the same, that at some point in time you're going to wonder, could there have been anything more? Like,
Yeah.
I think of, even though I haven't seen the most of it, I think of the show I Love Lucy.
Hmm.
Lucille Ball was an amazing actress. Lots of physical comedy. I love physical comedy. But in the same regard, adding little Ricky, their child on the show, helped change the dynamics of the show.
Right.
It helped provide a new layer of these characters that, well, now they can't just be doing their goofy plots, that now they also have to look after a child. And yes,
Right.
it's going to change the show. Yes, maybe the show isn't as strong as it may have been in earlier seasons, but it provided a different layer to these characters that you wouldn't have otherwise experienced had we not added this extra element.
Right. I think that is so beautiful. Like everything that you just said. I didn't know I would draw such inspiration from making a metaphor out of sitcoms to life.
Yeah,
So I love, I wrote down because I just adored what you said about losing your original audience because I think that happens so much in life as we change. And I think in a sitcom, I'm sure that happens too. Like The Office, for example, I love The Office and I love every season. But like towards those later seasons, everyone was like, "It's not as good. It's the writing's not as good because Michael left." And I'm like, "Yes, but also I love it, and I just adore every part and every minute. I wouldn't trade it for the world." So I definitely agree about like losing your original audience. I always say I'd rather it's from a musical, so I'm gonna quote this. I'd rather be 9 people's favorite thing than 100 people's ninth favorite thing. And I hold that close to the chest because I'd rather have a small circle than have a huge audience.
100%. And yeah, that holds so true. And I love that our story and our journey, I mean, it it's almost like the full circle with this, but understanding that, with our previous conversation, even the beginning of this one, but also in the same regard of that there's always room for change, room for growth, and that we're always going to continue changing and growing. We're going to make mistakes, but then hopefully learn from it, and that way we can not make those ones again and make different mistakes, and the cycle keeps going throughout our life.
Yeah, 1000% agree.
But yeah, and I really love the depth of this conversation that we've been having. Um, and so, as I said, Oakley, I always so much appreciate whenever, we have a chance to, to chat, and that we've been able to, like I said, stay in touch over the course of this last year and 5 days. And in fact, you've even suggested people for me to speak with on the podcast, and I've spoken with at least four of them at the minimum, thus far, and so I'm excited to, like I said, to continue speaking with people as I continue to grow this podcast and evolve my life as well.
Yeah, no, I'm so grateful because I don't believe that any of us live surface level lives. So I wildly appreciate that anytime I go to you, whether in any medium, is that social media, email, being on the podcast, and it's never going to be just surface level. We're always going to get into some sort of depth, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I always like I said, and appreciate speaking with you as well, and I love your questions. I love your appreciation for the craft and for this mode of storytelling, and even before we begin closing out, I did actually want to circle back to something that you were mentioning earlier, that that you love being able to, for instance, to cook, to sing, participating in escape rooms. I actually want to hear a little bit more about like your outside life, just beyond, of course, our conversations and PRSA, your job, and all that. I'm really curious to hear a little bit about that before we begin closing things out.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share. So, when I have time, I love to do certain things. I've been singing my entire life, so I sing everywhere that I go, and sometimes I don't even realize it. Like there are some times when my parents or someone around me is like, "Hey, you're singing and we're in public," and I'm like, "Oh crap!" Like it is just that inherent to me, like it's in my DNA. So like I adore it, and I love writing in my free time. I don't really publish much of it. Sometimes I do. I love playing with my dogs and hanging out with my family and friends. And that can mean a multitude of things. Like this last Sunday, we went to like a fall bonfire and like haunted houses and stuff. And I love that kind of thing. Like I feel like I've really gotten to the fall spirit this year. So I'm really enjoying that. I love mixology. I am a home bartender and I have my ABC license. I don't know if that's a thing in every state, but in Tennessee it's called ABC, the Alcohol Beverage Corporation, I think. I think that's what it's called. So basically I can do events or I can work at a bar in any instance and do it legally. So I've taken that test and I can do that. And so I do it at home and I'll do it for some events here and there. I love cooking. I don't cook as often as I want to, just because when I cook, I often make it a endeavor. I'm not just a quick cooker. I want it to be like an all day. I treat it as an art form, even a way to storytell in that way, because I'm like I want it to be like entree or appetizer, entree, and even sometimes a dessert. And I want it to be able to like tell a story or like convey a place. And a lot of times I'll pick a place and let's just go head first into like that cuisine, that kind of thing. Um, and then I love escape rooms. My friends and I got really into escape rooms during COVID because that was one of the places that you could go and not have to like be in contact with anyone. Like you just went to the room and tried to escape and absolutely got addicted to it. And so there's a company here in Memphis and we've done every room probably 2 or 3 times over. So every time we travel, like we're about to go to New Orleans, we're probably going to do an escape room there. So yeah, that's kind of the things that I enjoy. I love doing any sort of like games. I love games. My family has a game night every month where we cook and then we do a game. So I love that. Board games, card games, all those kind of things. So yeah. What about you?
Oh, yeah. First of all, I did want to ask before I answer that, what is your favorite game, out of curiosity?
Ooh, card game. I love the game of Five Crowns or Phase 10. Those are so fun if you haven't played those. And then board game. No one else loves Monopoly, so I won't say Monopoly, but I do love Monopoly. Um, hmm. Love Clue. Trying to think of what we normally play. Rummy Cube is really fun. I don't know if you've played that. Um, there's also this game called Racco. That's fun. Yeah, I mean, I love anything. Oh, Scattergories, that's it. Scattergories is my favorite game. Basically, it's a game where you like roll the dice and you have categories and you have to come up with words based on that letter on the dice that you rolled. And you only have like a certain amount of time. It's like a minute, and you have to. It's like it'll be like a boy's name, food, a place to go in the afternoon or something like, or a restaurant, and you have to come up with a place based on that letter. And it's really hard, but it's fun.
Wow, that's fascinating. I know for me growing up, I loved, playing Clue with the family. Um,
Yeah.
and we love a good Uno game. And so one of my hopes is that we haven't had it yet, but as of one of my goals for 2024, before it ends, we still have, as of recording, 60 something days left. Is I want a family game night. I'm determined that we're going to do one of those. We shall have one of those.
Yeah, we started doing it last year. We started doing like themes with it too. So like the first one was like football tailgate, and we played cards, and we like brought like a bunch of like appetizers, like pretzel bites and stuff like that. That was a buffalo chicken dip that felt very like football tailgate. And then the next day, like month, we did like Mexican food, and we played. I don't remember what game we played, but we did like tacos and stuff. And then like we did an Italian night, and we played like an Italian murder mystery game. So like kind of like theming it also makes it really fun.
That's exciting. Yeah, and I will say that for me, so I started off before even this year started. I set out a few different goals for myself, and I've just been having fun, accomplishing them as some of them are very fast paced, some of them were very slow, and are still a work in progress. But uh, but I've been really getting back into writing and reading. I am determined to, even though it's a very low goal, I'm determined to finish at least 12, reading 12 books this year. As low as the goal that is, my writing for my master's thesis took up a lot of my time, more than I expected. And so even writing just for fun now has slowly been coming back to me. And I'll sometimes walk into my office as a adjunct instructor and be like, I'm going to go write this article now. Like, I don't know what possesses me, but it's just, I need to go write this right now. And so I love that it's coming back to me slowly. Like I said, feeling like a superhero, like slowly regaining their powers after the final movie. But yeah, I've been enjoying that. And like I said, with reading as well, it's been so fun reading non-academic books. And this one book I've been reading, I have intentionally been taking a while reading it because I want to savor every page. I love the book, its meaning, its depth, but like it was something that I didn't want to just read it as a thing to check off. Like I wanted to intentionally read it and be alert while reading it. Being able to analyze it all, and not for academic reasons, but to be like, oh, this is interesting, fascinating.
Right.
So yeah, but outside all of that, I've been enjoying time speaking with family more, of course, doing podcasts. But I've actually spent the last several months, me and my mom have been taking our TV discussions to the next level. Since summer of last year, we had done weekly TV discussions where we speak about oftentimes first episodes of TV shows. Well, this summer, we decided, after 46 weeks of doing that, we decided to take it up a notch. We made a whole new channel for it. And so now we, as of recording this, I think we're at 60 videos published since the summer.
Amazing. That's incredible.
So yeah, and I've been loving it, and we've started getting into movies. We're not big movie people, so we're having fun with it. It's like a little adventure. And so on one hand, I love that we're able to do this, but I love that we're able to do this together. So it's been fun.
I'm sure you'll never ever regret that too. I'm sure it's such great time together with your mom as well.
Absolutely. And as I always say too, I'm on a mission to bring people together and tell the stories of others. And not everyone's stories is necessarily through through a traditional lens. Like, we're able to tell our own stories through doing these TV discussions. And so it's been a blast. And that actually partly our bond over TV partly also inspired my master's thesis in a way, directly and indirectly. And so, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, going back to like, one thing is not in a vacuum. Like, you can use skills that you learn outside of school and in school to do a million different things.
100%. Like I said, but Oakley, I've been so loving, like I said, this conversation, everything that we've had a chance to speak about, and I know that we will continue keeping in touch. And I love that you mentioned that you'd be interested in maybe doing this as an annual thing. I'd love to keep doing this as we're able to reflect back on our previous years going forward.
Yeah, I'll be so interested to see what we're doing next year, and if we're on a completely different trajectory, and what we'll call that chapter versus what we're calling this chapter.
Yeah, and I did want to ask too, so if you're looking back at this in the future, what is something that you want to tell your future self?
Ooh. Savor the book. Savor this chapter. Like you said, really go through and there is something about reading a really good book that you don't want it to ever end. And that's what we should feel every day, I think. I think you don't want to be able to just close it, put it down, and start another so fast and so quickly, because obviously that wasn't as good, or you have a wrong mentality. So keep reading, keep savoring.
I love that 100%. And what does it mean for you to be able to tell your story here on the podcast?
Wow, that's a big question. I think there's not a lot of opportunities for me, at least, to express myself in such a direct way. Like this medium, like I'm not really hiding behind a character or a format or, writing a, sequence or adding prose or, you know what I mean? Like there's not a lot of smoke and mirrors here. It's a lot of just, this is me, this is my story. I think this is good practice. It's a good way to express myself in a way that feels authentic. Sometimes I feel very uncomfortable talking about myself and my story. I'm much more an inquisitor. I like asking questions to people more often. I find myself in my relationships, often I have to insert my story or insert myself because I sometimes focus so much on another person. So this medium being, an interview style is very good for me. I love it.
I'm so glad. And if anyone wants to, that's watching, wants to connect with you, hear more about your story, or find out about any of your two nonprofits, where are the best places for them to find you?
Well, I would start on my Instagram, honestly, at Oakley Weddle, OakleyWeddle. I'm always posting about the different things and side quests that I'm doing. So look at that. Follow me there. Follow me on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn, rather. And, learn more about my professional journey. And Instagram is both professional and personal. And I think you can get everything from there.
Well, that's perfect to hear. And last but certainly not least, I want to allow for you to go ahead and close out this episode with whatever be a life lesson, inspirational thought, or whatever the case may be. The floor is all yours to close out episode 96 in this autumn season.
I would say to savor the moment and to focus less on what's next and focus and really treasure what's now.
I love that. Like I said, Oakley, I always love speaking with you. I know we're going to continue chatting, and I am so excited for us to continue, like I said, speaking in the future.
Me too. I can't wait. Thank you so much, Brandon. See you next year.
Yeah. For those tuning in, thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. I always appreciate it, and continue tuning in as we continue on our mission to bring people together. See you next time. Take care.